Alrighty, folks. Thanks for being patient. I was just making sure we were all good. There's been a couple StreamYard issues, but it seems like they hopefully are resolved. Let's go ahead and get started then. If you haven't checked in, go ahead and follow the check-in link. Make sure you get your points for today. 404 has already shared the link in chat for me. Thank you so much as always. I had copied it, but I didn't end up pasting it. Oh well. Let's see. With that, then, this is a fairly short stream, but if you have questions, comments, concerns, I'm more than happy to hear them out. Make sure that you feel comfortable going forward, and I believe, hopefully, we should be able to get you started on using Copilot because there are more ways to access it for free, even if temporarily. So if you are not super sure on how you might use Copilot, this is a great workshop for you. If you want access to more materials, etc., and you are an active student, this will also help you get access to those things. That indeed, we have been doing a struggle. It's been a rough time. All right, so let me make sure I have the right window up. Cool. It is morning, and I'm still waking up because time zones changed here in the US. So, whoops. Anyway, hello, my name is Cecilia. I'm a coach at Major League Hacking. I use she, her pronouns, and I really love reading. So if you are bored and happen to find me in Today in Global Hack Week, which I don't think I'm doing this week, I'm doing closing though, you're welcome to go ahead and ask me as we, get workshops started or something in the free time. I love book recommendations, or you're welcome to, ask what I'm currently reading. But not for right now. We're going to talk about Copilot. And what even is GitHub Copilot? Well, in short, it's an AI programmer that can help you write, debug, and understand code. And right here, these buttons on the bottom are actually different things that we're going to do today in today's workshop. But why might you use Copilot? And depending on how you prefer to work, especially when you're learning, a lot of your time seems to be spent, oh, I don't know how to do that. And then you go Google or search or do something else. And then you go through the rabbit hole. And if you are someone like me who likes to know more about how something works, then you go into deeper rabbit holes. And then you never come back to your project, you never finish it. But with Copilot, you might actually be able to help yourself out by not getting quite caught in those rabbit holes, keeping in your flow. So that way you can work on your project, still gain some knowledge, and then when you are at a point that you can pause and go ahead and do those deep dives, you absolutely can. So for example, folks were saying that 37 hours of work turned into 24 hours of flow over the course of a few days. Pretty neat. Now, in order for us to use Copilot for today, we will be using Visual Studio Code. We'll also be using Python. So if you don't have either of those, feel free to go ahead and install those. If not, feel free to follow along, watch the recording later, etc., just to ensure that you get a chance to pause, keep going, etc. So GitHub Copilot is in more than a few places. For those that are asking, if you actually use different IDEs like IntelliJ, NeoVim, and a couple others, then you'll be able to use it in those spaces as well, including the command line. There is a GitHub command line, so you might consider how you might be using it in your preference. But again, for today's workshop, we'll be working in VS Code just because it's easier to set up. But like I said, installing Python. So if you don't have Python just yet, go ahead and go install it from python.org/downloads. But if you're not sure if you have a relatively current version, go ahead and open up a terminal window, whether it's the command prompt PowerShell, a terminal in VS Code. If you're on a MacBook, you'll probably be opening up Z Shell these days. If you're on a Linux computer, you might be opening up what's called terminal or xterm. And open any of those, just type in python-v so that way you can check what version you have. So that way you can be up to speed. Now, you don't need the latest and greatest version. You should be able to run things just fine, but it does help. I actually will go ahead and show you how I would check my current Python version. I have a brand new Visual Studio Code window open. I'm going to go ahead and open the terminal. Now, I did that with a keyboard shortcut using Control and the tilde. And I'm going to just type in python-v. And I did it wrong. It's python-v. There we go. So, nope. Why do you not like me today? Yeah, it just keeps opening Thanks. Well, I have Python and I have 3.1.2, so I just don't know why it's opening an interpreter. But if it is opening an interpreter, you do have Python, you have a functioning version, you should be good. These days, most people are using Python version 3 point something. So as long as you have that, we should be good to go. And yeah. Now I'll keep this open for most folks. Again, I'm using a default command line or command prompt terminal instance in my VS Code just because of some past projects I've done. You don't have to obviously use that. You can use PowerShell. You can open Git Bash. As you can see, I have a couple different terminals that I could possibly use. And depending on what you're doing, you might change what you end up using. And again, this is a Windows computer that I'm working off of, so if you are on a MacBook or any form of Apple product, then you're probably going to be using Z Shell or something else in your VS Code. And then continuing on, going back to our presentation, knowing that it'll take a little bit of time, I want to keep going where I want to remind you that GitHub Copilot lives anywhere. So you can, in fact, follow this tutorial on your own. I would suggest doing it as a recording so that way you can pause and Google and fix things, and that way I don't leave you behind by accident, even if in the future. But you can also use it in Visual Studio Code. You can use it in Vim, in NeoVim, and any JetBrains IDEs. Then you can also use it on the GitHub command line, like I mentioned, which, hooray. And then, like I said, we are also using Visual Studio Code today. So if you don't already have this, feel free to install it from code.visualstudio.com. It has a lot of built-in extensions. It's very popular amongst a number of programmers these days just because it's so all-inclusive. But you have your own needs, you have your own preferences. I will not stop you. It just makes it easier to follow along with some of the features that we're going to use today in the workshop. But again, you're more than welcome to follow along in your own preferred IDE, so long as they have an extension for Copilot. Otherwise, this won't work. Continuing on while those are downloading, I want to keep going where, again, if anybody is stuck, is having issues, is, like wanting to just hit pause, remember that this is being recorded. It will be on YouTube afterward. And if you find that I'm not covering something or I don't go into depth of something, we hold this workshop, I believe, once or twice every Global Hack Week. So you are more than welcome to see if there's another instance coming up for GitHub Copilot. In case you want to hear another coach explain things, you can also ask questions there if you're not quite sure of your question just yet. That does tend to happen. Or you can go to past YouTube recordings, again, on our YouTube Major League Hacking, go to streams, and they'll have all the different Global Hack Weeks that we've been doing, and you can go find other people's Copilots. In fact, you can even find an old one of mine, and there's a chance I might have gone more into depth on other things than, what I might go into depth on today. It really just depends on the questions I get. So by now, my hope is things are somewhat installed, or you're hitting, yes, go ahead and install. And I want to keep going. And again, make sure we have time for any questions. And if we do have any bugs, that folks who want to keep going are able to, keep moving on, play around while we deal with whatever comes up. But if you already have the Visual Studio Code window open, then you're going to go ahead and install the Copilot extension. And so there's a couple different ways you can do it, from the Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P to open the command palette. Another thing you can do to access the extension libraries. Once they say, obviously, extensions, install extensions. If you're using the keyboard commands, no, we're not updating yet. That would be really bad on stream. Another way that you can do this is actually going to this little box over here where it says extensions. There's a box floating away from it. That's usually how I describe it to folks. And you go ahead and click that, and we're going to go ahead and search Copilot, which, using the keyboard shortcut, you would have done this the same. Now, I already have Copilot installed, but you'll go ahead and install this, get this set up. And so I also have GitHub logged in on Visual Studio Code, so I can access GitHub Copilot chat through here. Now, if you do not have access to it, you will not see that Copilot bit. So once this installs, you might get a notification on your bottom right saying, hey, you don't have access to Copilot yet. That's all good. We're going to work on that. So once it has installed both Copilot and Copilot chat, where it should be good, it will tell you that you need to pay for it. But also there are some changes that have happened in GitHub Copilots recently, actually, I think within the last 2 months. So if you are not an active student right now, rejoice, for you have a way to access Copilot. For a month, you will have free access to GitHub Copilot. You can go ahead and Google GitHub Copilot, free trial, etc. And you can actually follow along with this workshop and for the next few weeks. Now, if you are an active student, I would highly recommend that instead you go ahead and access the Student Developer Pack, where Yes, you do have to install both Copilot and Copilot Jet. So with the GitHub Student Developer Pack, which I'm typing in now, you get access to tons of resources. And what's needed here is you're going to have a student ID. As long as it has an expiration date, you can use that for your validation of your student status. If it does not have an expiration date, you will have to find a different source of validity for your student status, which can be an unofficial transcript screenshot, your current course schedule screenshot, and I believe there might be one other that I'm totally blanking on. But the point is you're supposed to be able to see your name, your current semester, and some classes that you've taken if you choose to use those. I can't just use my email and ID because I don't have those things. And my email is from my university is not reliable historically. So I've had to use the transcript method. And that usually works. If you still have issues, we do have a community on GitHub to talk about potential issues that you may have, where they will usually respond with, hey, have you tried some of these other things? And that might be that you're missing billing information or some other aspects. So highly recommend that you download or you sign up for and get the Student Developer Pack initiated. Again, if you are not able to get it today or right now, consider the free trial for GitHub Copilot while you are, sorting out what's going on behind the scenes to get access. You will have that for a year, and I want to briefly show you all the different things that come with it. Where if you get access to the Student Developer Pack, you get access to Copilot, some tutorials on how to use Copilot. If you're not familiar with Markdown or GitHub, this is another place to check out. And again, there's lots of things like certification. That's actually something I want to do. And depending on where you are planning on sending your career into, there are a variety of tools and resources available for you, such as like the virtual event kit or DevOps or mobile app development and so on. And so that is just some of a preview of what we have. But the GitHub Student Developer Pack also has access to various platform credits, various domains, access to any of the cloud services, etc. And again, there's so much. As you can see, I'm still scrolling. If you are learning how to use different courses, then you might consider, again, checking out things, especially if you're like, I don't know which course is going to work for me. All of these courses have some free 3 to 6 months access, sometimes 1 month access, that you can try things out for free and decide, do you like the courses that they're developing? If so, maybe that's something you might want to pay for later, just because you enjoyed it or it really helped you out. So personally, I use MongoDB a lot, so I actually really love this free certification access because I would love to be certified in Mongo. But the point is, the Student Developer Pack has tons of resources. I'm only halfway down the page, and there's still so much more. So highly recommend you check it out. Once you get access to the Student Developer Pack, all that stuff is yours for free for a year. You will have to renew every year that you are a student in order to keep having access to all these things, but it's so worth it. Okay, rant over. Yes, so if you have not accessed the Student Developer Pack, you do need to sign up as an active student. If you are not an active student, the Student Developer Pack is not for you, and I am so sorry. That is just the nature of the Student Developer Pack. Continuing on, let's actually use Copilot now. If you have gotten everything ready, if you've set up Copilot, hooray. Sometimes it's just a matter of connecting your GitHub because you already have the Student Developer Pack. It may take a few times. You may have to close the window and reopen. Sometimes you just have to sign out and sign in again, just for it to recognize those status updates. So if you, again, don't have access to the Student Developer Pack, consider getting the free trial temporarily. Just so that way you can get that set up. But that could take some time. So I do want to make sure that folks who are already up to speed and ready to go are good to go. And again, you can come back and watch these recording, hit pause, etc. But we're going to go ahead and open a new window, which I already have up from previously. You can use Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P to open the command palette to type in git clone. Or if you are on a new window, you can see this clone git repository, which I'll go ahead and show you. So it's on the welcome page. I have clone git repository. I do have to click the clone from GitHub just because I don't have the URL on me. So we'll go ahead and type in mlh/copilot starter. So we're looking for this first result here, the basic Flask web app to demonstrate the functionality of GitHub Copilot. And then I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, go and dump it into my repository, select it as the destination. No, I don't want to open it in a new window. I just want to open in this one and it'll restart for me. So that welcome page is still here. No worries. No, I don't need to do that. So we'll stop it. So continuing on with our app.py, which I will go back to our little, make sure you select clone from GitHub, like I said. Go ahead and open up the MLH Copilot Starter Workshop, which is going to be that Git, like I said. And then you're going to open app.py. And I will pause here since that was quite a bit. But let's see. Yeah. So the beautiful nature of these workshops, again, is that they are recorded. So you can hit pause. Oftentimes we have a lot of content and a limited amount of time. So like longer freeform workshops are 2 hours. These partner workshops are an hour and we have tons to get through. But this one is actually quite short. So please don't call me ma'am. I really hate that word. As far as validation of the student developer pack, you can renew it so long as you are a student. You will still have access to your GitHub account. It just means you will no longer have access to those free resources. Okay, so if you don't have the GitHub Student Developer Pack sorted out, if you don't have Copilot sorted out, do not stress. You can still clone this workshop. You can still open up app.py and you can still start to understand what it is that we're working with. So I'll give a moment for you to do that. Again, where you're going to, if it will let me do this, you're going to go ahead and clone from GitHub. Once you are, and this is something you can also do in the terminal, but again, Visual Studio Code does this for you. You're going to choose that GitHub Copilot Starter from MLH, and then you're going to open app.py. So once you open up app.py, if you are familiar with Flask, you might say, oh, I already know how to read this. Everything's great and wonderful. But let's take a step back and let's say it's 2 a.m. It's your first time using Python. It's your first time using Flask, and you have no idea what you're doing. You just copied a tutorial and you're like, yeah, I have code now. Now what? So this is where Copilot will come and help out, where you can use Control-I or Command-I to open up GitHub Copilot in the file that you're working in. And so one of the slash commands that you can use is /explain. And so if things are still not working, sometimes you just need to reload the window. Again, open up the command palette, Control-Shift-P, Command-Shift-P, and type reload window. But I'll go ahead and show you very quickly how I open up the GitHub Copilot window. Again, Control-I, and now it gives me the prompt Ask Copilot. Now, so this is a personal preference, but something that might be a tip for you. I will usually select what it is that I would like explained, so that way Copilot has a little bit of context for me. So I could select the whole file, I could select just the route, because maybe I do know Python or I know the basics of programming, and I already know that this is some function where it's saying seconds since epoch. That's okay. But maybe I've never actually seen a route before, and I'm like, what is this? What are these commands? What's going on here? So let's go ahead and type /explain. And I can give it additional context if I wanted to. I could just hit enter as it is. I could say explain this route thing. I could say explain the file. So for now, let's just hit enter, where it's saying specifically in the context of what I've selected, what this is. And you can see that it is a Python function with a decorator, where it's the @app.route, and it's part of the web framework Flask. And so it's saying, you know, it's accessing all these functions, which now we can jump around the file. We love that. And it's giving us more context. So personally, I always say, make sure that you select what you want it to work with, just so that way you have purposely guided where your focus should be. Because if you tell, let's say you're working with a mentor and you're like, I don't get anything. That is such a generic question that they don't know where to start to properly help you at a hackathon or like in a tutoring session. And so in order to practice directing your questions or learning what you need to ask, again, I highly recommend that you select things. So that way you might skip some things that you already know, or if you want to do a quick review, it's like, oh, very quickly, you know, Copilot, and you give it a small prompt of like, explain this in 1 sentence. And so you can give it some more guidance like that. Right. So we've got it to explain code. Let's go ahead and run this code and see if it actually works, which hint, hint, it doesn't. So I already have the terminal open. There are multiple ways to access it, from Control or Command tilde. I think it's actually Control tilde for all of them. all platforms. But you'll go ahead and create a terminal using the Command Shift or Control Shift P command palette access. Or I believe you can actually click on the very bottom and you can actually open up one like that as well. But again, I already have a terminal open. So continuing on, we're going to actually do some magic here where I need to open up the terminal. And so I am going to follow these commands here on the left, which says first, Python, oopsie daisy, no, didn't want to go ahead. First, we're going to create a virtual environment called venv. And so if you're familiar with Python environment, this is fairly standard stuff, but if you're not, these are some commands we need to make sure that this works properly, that we install any dependencies or requirements, and make sure that we can actually run this properly. So we're going to start out with python-m venv, and we're going to name this venv. So it's going to go ahead and create things. No, I don't want to do that. So it's created our virtual environment. Now we need to activate it. So depending on whether you are using a Mac or a Windows, there are, I believe, 2 different commands. So this is a Windows command where I'm using, oh my goodness, there we go. Sorry, my keyboard is adjusted and I always forget the forward slashes because I have it autocomplete for me because I'm a bit lazy. And I, again, mostly work on Mac. So now that I've activated it using that activate command, we now have this parentheses in front of our path. And that just says the environment is activated. If we want to deactivate it, all we have to do is type deactivate, if I can spell. And so that will disable this. So that way we're not working in that environment that doesn't necessarily associate with a project. If we forget to deactivate it, some things can happen and it's just very confusing to untangle it. Now that we've activated this environment, the next step we want to do is install the requirements we need, which is found in this requirements.txt file, which is just Flask. It will also install all the dependencies we need to actually run Flask. So we'll go ahead and say pip install -r requirements.txt. And it's doing its thing and it's installing it local to the environment. So if I were to, use Flask in a different folder and the environment is not on because I'm not in the correct project folder that I would like to use it for, it will not work. So this is if you're familiar with Node modules and how you might have local installations of Node versions of various library versions, this is much the same. I believe for Mac with that scripts activate, I believe it's just /venv scripts activate or something like that. It's been a minute. Yeah, so this environment basically isolates this folder for us. We are saying when this environment is activated, we want to use a specific version of Python and install things with regards to the specific version. Let's say I made a second Copilot starter with a different version of Python that I wanted to use, such as like the latest and greatest version of Python, then I might have different versions of the same libraries to run the same things. And so dependencies vary depending on the version. And this just helps you control like which folders have which versions. Depending on when you work on a project as well, things will change over time, particularly as you upgrade things, etc. And so this will just help maintain a snapshot of like, when it was Python 3.1.2, this is what you need, versus later on you might upgrade Python and now you have Python 3.7 or something. I think we're on 3.4. You might say, oh, well, Python 3.4 requires these specific files at this version instead. So cross-compatibility. It basically just kind of isolates things. And again, you're using this on a project basis, ideally, where if you are purposely doing things, you avoid, yes, if you're using Python on a different desktop, laptop, device, etc., you will have to create the environment and reinstall requirements.txt, but that is the only time you should have to do it, just when you first use the project. All right, we have done the installation. And now we're going to run Flask. And so sometimes this doesn't work for me. It should hopefully. There we go. And so this is currently running on the specific port 5000 on a local host. And so it's telling us, hey, this is a local development server. If you are, don't use this in production, blah, blah, blah. And so we want to use this URL to go ahead and access our Flask app. Oh, excuse me. I am so tired today. And so I'm going to go ahead and access it. As you can see, it's flipping out because there are errors. And so again, putting on the mindset of a 2 a.m. new hacker who's, freaking out, maybe they don't know what a type error is. And they're like, whoa, nope, full pause. I'm panicking. I don't know what this is. I will not process what's on the screen. And that absolutely happens. Or maybe the first question is like, whoa, what do I ask? Like, where is it? How do I find it? And if you initially look at these first few, you're like, nope, I don't know where it is. I don't know what these I have no idea. I have zero idea because none of this is code that you've personally written. Now, again, if you do know what a type error is and you are in a state in which you might understand, you might go, oh, okay, I think it's probably that there's like a return issue, which as you can see, if you did stop to read this, the return is not a valid response on some function. We don't know which function, but we just know something is not happy. The return type must be a string, decked list, or tuple with headers or status. The response instance was not callable, but it was an integer. So we have some hints. But again, putting on that 2 a.m. hacker, flipping out. We didn't read that. We have no idea what's going on. And so we will decide to use Copilot because we're like, no, this is broken. We have no idea what we're doing, where to start, nothing. We will make Copilot fix it for us. So if we go ahead and open Control-I or Command-I to open up GitHub Copilot in the file, we will then type the next / command that's available to you, which is /fix. Now, remembering the tip from earlier where I said, hey, we should make sure that it has the correct context of what we want it to work in. And so in this instance, I might say, oh, I want to use the file itself as the context, or something like that. Or maybe we have a little bit more knowledge and we're like, well, we know that these library imports are fine. We know like basic Flask, this is fine. We know though that the issue is in one of these two functions as a result of knowing some context knowledge. So depending on how much knowledge you have and how much you read that error, you might eventually whittle it down to be like, I think the error is somewhere around here. Because again, we didn't get a line number of which function returned the wrong thing. And so we're going to go ahead and select that, hit Control-I, /fix. And so this is something I also recommend as a second step, different from explanation. If you are doing a fix, I would heavily encourage that you give it the error that you got. Because if you just say arbitrarily, fix things, you haven't selected anything, and you just say fix it, there's a chance Copilot will give you a wrong answer. So if you are working with friends, I would highly encourage that multiple of you, have run fix on the same thing, just to see the different kinds of answers you get. So that way you can say, tried that, nope, that wasn't the answer. Tried this, no, that wasn't the answer. Tried this, this was the answer. Just that way you have a little more variety in answer. If you're working on your own, or your friends are asleep, or you just want to say, I want to figure it out on my own, no trouble there. I mean, I highly encourage you to ask for help because there's nothing wrong with that. You might want to, again, target how you are using Copilot. So select what you think might be the issue, and then tell it what the issue was. Type error. And there's different things you could do, such as copying the type error here. You could copy the whole thing. I would, again, recommend just a quick summary. I've just typed in type error, but I'm going to go ahead and copy that in. And I don't need the trace back, but I'll go ahead and hit enter. And so voila, it tells me right off the bat, very quickly, very short, that it was the seconds function returning an integer instead of a valid response type. And then it says, just convert this integer to a string before returning it. And so as you can see, they've done that down here. So I'll go ahead and accept because yes, that makes sense. However, I will pause you and say, okay, we've looked at this code. Does it make sense, the fix? Like, yes, we could probably go test it. It absolutely will work. That is the correct answer. However, is it clean code? Is it readable code? Does it make sense to add that change? Or is this change supposed to be done somewhere else? There's a chance that Copilot, which this is the change that it made, it encapsulated the string of the second since epoch function. Would it be better to put string here instead of int? And so this is something that you'll have to help yourself consider to ensure that you're making the most out of the fixes that Copilot has made for you and truly using it as a pair programmer instead of like, yes, Copilot, you know everything. I will do everything you say, because that will introduce bugs. And you can see this evidence in past workshops that I've run where I have actively used Copilot and I've tried to show people like, hey, in this instance, we are purposely not going to look at the code. We're going to autocomplete and hit tab and we're going to move on. And later on, it will introduce a bug that I didn't catch. Versus if I spend the time to say, does this make sense? Do I get what's going on? And is there a better way that I could do it to ensure that I'm writing better quality code that might make life a little easier or more simple or however it is that I want to use it? Okay, so let's go ahead and hit save because that is the fix. I'm not going to improve the code by moving string here because there's a possibility I might have a type error because of the epoch with time.time. There's a number of different things, but the point is I might test those things in my own free time. So I'm going to go ahead and hit refresh, and you will see that now it works, where it gives us a giant number since it is seconds since epoch. Makes sense. Continuing on, what else can we do with Copilot? And so once we fix things, again, we've gotten this error, now no longer an error, we just have a number. But what else can we do with it? Like I said, there is also a matter of prompting it to do things for you. And so once again, opening up the Copilot instance window, Control-I, Command-I, we're going to add a route that shows the hours since epoch. So in this instance, there is no slash command. It's just a prompt that we're going to give it. Add a route that shows hours since the epoch. Which, fun fact, if you are in science, you might call it an epoch instead of an epoch. That's how you know who is a computer scientist and who is a astro or geo-based science. Or really, yeah. Okay, so as you can see, once again, it's giving me two things. It's giving me the function, and it's also giving me another route should I care to use a different route for it. Whereas I might say, oh, I want to call a different function. There's different ways I could do this, but again, it wouldn't hurt to review the code that it suggests and say, yeah, that makes sense. Or, is there a better way to do this? Depending on how you code things, there is. So we'll go ahead and accept. But as you can see, it's doing it wrong. It's saying that this code is never reached because if you are familiar with Python, you know that tabs are the way it manages scope. So we do have to shift this back so that way it does recognize this correctly as this is a new function and this is a new route. Now, let's say I wanted to make this a little better. Well, in order to get the, seconds since epoch, we don't have to divide anything. But if we want hours since epoch, wouldn't we just take this? So could we not just call the same function, but do a different divisor? And here's another question. Is this math actually right? Is it going to be 3,600 in order to divide it to get the hours? That's something you need to investigate because AI is not great at math. And so sometimes I get this split up as 60 times 60. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's something else. And so I have to do the math to check. Now, I don't usually do it in this workshop, but if I were having math generated, I would double check in my work. And so again, I might not have a function hours since epoch because what if I want hours since a specific timestamp? In which case I might have, this epoch thing, but I might do different math here. And so in that case, I could probably actually do that in the route because it's the only thing that's happening. I'm okay with that happening there. But depending on how efficient you prefer to be, it might be that computation costs a little extra in the decorator. And I'm not sure. These are just things that I'm thinking about of let's say I was, talking about this in an interview where I wanted to make sure that I considered all the possibilities of the code that was generated to make sure that I truly understand it. Okay, what else can we do with it? We can also start creating a new route for minutes. And this will, again, show you some of that. So it's telling you hello, which that's not quite what we want. We actually want the minutes route. And so we will go ahead and start to see, as I was mentioning, what if we do the divisor a second since epoch in the actual return of the function for the route, which there's a difference now where hours has a separate function, minutes does not. And depending on what we prefer to do, this is something that could be simpler and is very understandable as far as making sure that things make sense from a readability standpoint, because now we have this duplicate of well, why do we need a separate function for hours if minutes didn't need that? And so you want to make sure that you clear up that confusion, because it is pretty important that you have readable code. Now in a hackathon that tends to fall apart, but that is something to know for the future. So again, we auto-completed by hitting tab, and voila, we have our minutes. And so as you can see, it's still just suggesting things like maybe I need a main, which that's the Python expectation, especially if you're doing more formal things. But again, this is an example workshop. So, all right. What comes next? As I've mentioned, we got very fortunate that Copilot did not introduce any bugs for us. However, I have run this workshop in the past where I haven't selected the file or I haven't selected a subset of where I think the error might be. And I've actually had Copilot give me the wrong answer, where it will sometimes show me, hey, you forgot to import the time module. Except I'm like, hey, but wait, I did import the time module. What are you talking about? And so I have to have a healthy amount of doubt, not complete doubt, but I need to give it a little more guidance for it to be the best that it can be. So with Copilot making mistakes, it won't understand what you want every time unless you are careful in your instruction. Much like coding, where sometimes people have been told, and I've told people this specifically, programming is like telling a 2-year-old what to do. It will do exactly what you tell it, which means if you don't tell it the right thing or you don't give it enough context, it will do it wrong. So Copilot is a little similar as with any AI, where you do have to make sure that you give it enough context to do the right thing that is what you've asked it to do. So there's also the fact that Copilot will always be updated, but there is a chance it won't know about the latest libraries, APIs, etc. And so you do have to spend some time understanding things to edit the code it produced. Much like we talked about, what's some good coding habits here in the stuff that it generated? And the answer is, well, it depends on what you're trying to do and how you're trying to make it scalable for the future. And a hackathon may not be important. In the workplace, absolutely important. Somebody actually that I met who is a very high level person in a big company did say inherently when you are writing code, you are creating debt. Every piece of code you write is a piece of code debt. And so by having chat generate more code, you're making worse debt. But by reviewing it, you are reducing that debt. Regardless, it's always a debt. That's a very myopic view on things, but I think it makes sense given where we are with code bases today. Adding more code debt just makes life harder for the next person and the next person and the next person. So be mindful of the code quality that you work on. But either way, you are a hacker at the end of the day, and you will always do great because you'll figure it out at the end. Now, as far as adding Copilot to your team, like I said, it is a pair programmer. It's basically your mentor at 2 a.m. when all the other mentors have gone home. It can even be considered like having an extra teammate. And a quick review of what you can do. You can do / commands such as explain or fix, or you can prompt it to create new things for you, which is what we did today. And if you have additional resources that you'd like to check out, make sure you look at our MLH link Copilot guides, Copilot examples, and Copilot config. Now, I haven't personally configured Copilot because I do tend to run this workshop for so many folks. I really want to try and keep a clean instance, but that's not to say that you can't go configure things to work better for your preferences, which I think will make that much better of an experience for you. And I believe that's all we got. So with that, I'd like to encourage you to fill out our feedback form. Tell us how we can improve. We'd love to make sure that we make a better stream for you. And if you're not familiar with it, I'll go ahead and paste the link. Go ahead and fill out a feedback form after this. We are basically done. Yeah, any questions, comments, concerns? Like I said, I knew we would finish early, but I wanted to make sure if there were any questions that we had time to talk about it, to try things out, all sorts of things. The longest bit of this workshop is waiting for people to install things. And because of that, I've decided that it makes sense to do the workshop without waiting. So that way folks can watch this later after things are installed and not have to skip like 20 minutes of just like, I'm waiting for you to install things and therefore I'm filling empty time. Given that there are no questions coming in just yet, I mean, I know there is a bit of a stream lag. I'll give it a little bit more. I will probably wrap up, give you a chance to go take a quick break, grab some water, do all the things you got to do, get a meal if it's lunchtime or dinner time or breakfast time where you're at, because UT is coming up next with his third part to his Chrome extension project. That is exciting. Nope, 4. He replied to it. I misread. It is part 4. Goodness, UT just cranks them out. Alrighty. Well, like I said, no new questions, so take that break, come back in about 20 minutes for UT's stream, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of Global Hack Week. I will probably see you all at closing if you happen to attend. If not, maybe next Global Hack Week. Have a good one, and thanks so much. Make sure you fill out that feedback form.